back to another edition of the Canadian Ruck. Today we're speaking with Rugby Canada legend Heather Moyse. We'll get into that a little bit. As for today, just a reminder, as always, any way to contact us, we're on Twitter at Canadian Ruck, Instagram, we're at _Canadian_Ruck, Facebook at the Canadian Ruck, and to email us, thecanadianruck@gmail.com. As always, you can listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Google Podcasts, and CastBox. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And you can also watch us on YouTube, where you can subscribe there. Just search up The Canadian Ruck. Our hats will be available soon. I've had a couple asking to order, so Archie and Moose, you have yours earmarked. And again, if you want one, please message me with a question, or so that we can either have me answer or have one of the guests answer for your chance to win a hat. Today, COVID-19 is still shutting everything down throughout the sporting world. We won't get into much of that today because there's not really a lot of news, except in New Zealand on the weekend, Crusaders of Super Rugby, some of the boys were caught training together. It looks like 5 of them, Richie Mwanga and a few others, doing things they're not supposed to be doing. I'm a Crusaders fan myself, so a little disappointed in hearing that. And we have Tyler Ardron coming up on a podcast soon. He plays for the Chiefs. Maybe we'll get his thoughts on that as well. But today, I love my coffee and tea. Our focus is we're going to look a little bit at high school athletics. It ties in nicely and somewhat with Heather's conversation. But today we want to look at high school athletics and multi-sport aspect of athletics. I came from a small high school. If you didn't play a sport, that sport probably didn't happen. So we were always doing something year round. Soccer, hockey, basketball, volleyball, into rugby, and then baseball or softball in the summer. It's just how you grow up in a small town. That seems to be not happening nearly as much nowadays, with kids getting centralized and individualized in sports earlier in life. And Heather's talk kind of alludes to that. I stumbled across a nice quote from Coach Andrew Krasowski. He coaches basketball at Point Park University in the States. And he says, here's the truth. The goal of high school sports is to learn how to be a better person, a better teammate, a better communicator, and to enjoy being a teenager. Something you can't get back. It's mistaken a lot now that high school sports is a passageway or a pathway or a gateway to a D1 scholarship or a gateway to a higher level in sport. And Krasowski's arguing that no, it's to become a better person, better teammate, communicator, and enjoy being a teenager. And a lot of that you can see is being lost on teenagers nowadays. It's their sports are becoming more professional in the sense where they're training as if they are already professional. So with that, we're going to look at 4 different topics. We're going to talk a little bit about multi-sport athletes, grit, critical moments, and no regrets. And a lot of this ties in with Heather's conversation. So multi-sport athletes, there's a big push back when I played is that everybody was multi-sport because you had to. Now the push seems to be to become individualized. But when you look at multi-sport athletics as a whole, it brings so much more to the person. It helps you become more athletic because you're learning different skills. It leads to less overuse injuries. If you're training in one sport constantly, those muscles or those knee joints or what have you, are going to be higher likely to be injured and to cause some damage. You're going to have more motivation because you're not getting bored of doing the same thing over and over. And sometimes when you're younger, when you're 15 or 16, you might not feel like you're bored, but you do get burned out. It's going to help create confidence in the athlete by learning new different skills. It's going to help them become creative. Naturally, they're going to become more well-rounded. You're going to learn new skills. It's great for cross-training from sport to sport. We have Brad May, who played for the Buffalo Sabres in the NHL, coming up in a couple of weeks on a podcast. He played high school rugby. You look at Wayne Gretzky, he played lacrosse, basketball, or baseball, hockey, he did everything. So those cross-training skills, Gretzky always said that playing lacrosse helped him from getting crushed and killed playing hockey. And a couple really key things as well is you're going to meet new people, you're going to make new friends. If you're playing the same sport over and over, You're stuck playing with the same people over and over, and I'm sure you're making great friends and great teammates, but you're also missing the chance to interact with new people and find out ways to grow as a person. Some other things you learn through high school athletics and athletics in general is grit. All right, and I can't stress grit enough. Grit's very important. It leads you to learning perseverance, how not to give up, learning resilience, how to bounce back from adversity. It helps you build, develop, and follow through on your goals. You set a goal, you have the grit and desire and tenacity to get there. That's awesome. Uh, and just as importantly, I've always said there's no such thing as a mistake if you learn from it. And I think grit allows you to learn from those failures and those past mistakes. All right, one quote I really love about grit, and it's kind of cheesy, but I love the Rocky films. But from Rocky Balboa, um, it helps you learn what you're made of and learn what you're worth. So this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. I use this with coaching. I use it in motivational videos I make for my teams. But this is something Rocky Balboa said to his son. Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are. It will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth. But you got to be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you got to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that. I'm always going to love you no matter what happens. You're my son. You're my blood. You're the best thing in my life. But until you start believing in yourself, you ain't going to have a life. That sums up grit, perseverance, resilience, all wrapped up in one from Rocky. Again, it's a little cheesy, but it is one of my favorite motivational lines. Another aspect that high school athletics helps you learn is critical moments. In critical moments, you might not recognize them at the time, but when you reflect back on past accomplishments or past mistakes or failures that you've learned from, you might realize, wow, that was a critical moment in my life. And some of the key ones, you learn how to win. You learn how to be a good winner and not rubbing people's faces and things like that. But, just as important, you learn how to lose. Anytime you play a game, there's a 50-50 chance that you're coming out on the wrong end of a score. And that's one thing that Heather and I talk about. And I did a little bit with Al Sharon as well. My philosophy as a coach, whether you agree with it or not, is that winning only matters if you get paid. My philosophy behind that is that, as I said, you start a game, you have 50-50 chance of winning or losing, slim possibility of a tie. But it's the progress, it's the process, it's seeing the steps forward you make. And yeah, for sure, it's nice to be recognized as a winner for all your hard work, but oftentimes that doesn't happen, and you've got to be okay with that. You've got to be able to learn from that and move on. And just as importantly for critical moments is that with winning and losing, you learn to see your successes through both of those areas. All right, can you win and fail at the same time? Absolutely. Can you lose and see some successes? For sure you can. And I think it's imperative that high school athletes and coaches understand those differences. And the last talking point for me, before we get to interview, is no regrets. And that's something you can look at athletics or in life in general. But in athletics, simply to play each game as if it's your last, whether it's hockey and it's shift by shift, or if it's rugby and it's half by half or play by play, but you play that as if it's your last time that you get to play rugby. And with COVID-19, I think some athletes are realizing that, wow, that might have been the last time I played this season, maybe longer if they're at the end of their career. It's hard to say. A couple other things that you want to make sure that you're not hiding back from regret is not letting yourself down. You need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror after each training session, after each workout, after each game, each match, and realize that I gave everything I can. You might have had a bad day, and your effort might not have appeared to be the best, but if you knew it was your best effort on that day, then you can live with that. And I think just as important is not letting your teammates down. When you're on a team sport, it's imperative that you're as prepared as possible to help the other 14 members on the rugby pitch, or the other 4 guys on the ice, or the other 10 guys on the football field, or 4 on the basketball court. That you're doing all you can to be prepared mentally and physically and emotionally and invested in that match, so that everybody on that court, on that pitch, on that surface, playing field, ice, what have you, knows that you each have each other's backs and you're going to give everything you can to be successful, whether you win or lose. You're not leaving anything behind. And if you go back to that quote from Coach Kurzowski, one might regret not playing other sports or taking up different activities because they were so focused on one individual sport or activity. And that's one of my fears as a high school rugby coach, is a lot of student athletes often say that they don't want to play because they're scared to get hurt and risk their chances of playing their primary sport. My fear is always, 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, they're going to regret saying no. Because once you step on a rugby pitch, you realize how fun it is and how helpful it can be in other areas of life. All of this, though, leads us to our amazing guest today. I've got a little video package to play for you if you're watching on YouTube. Some highlights of Heather's playing times. As I said to Heather in the interview, she reminds me a combination of kind of Jonah Lamu and Sonny Bill Williams, combination of speed and power, her offloading ability. She also had finesse. She had some nice little inside-out moves, and it was a true pleasure talking to her. And we're gonna key her up here in a couple seconds. So please stay with me and enjoy the conversation with Heather. So Heather Moyse is coming to us from Prince Edward Island. She's living in Toronto now. She's considered one of the best fullbacks of all time in the female game, and a legend all around. She played in 2 Rugby World Cups, 06 and 2010. 06, she was a tourney all-star and led the tournament in points with 35 and tries with 7. And in 2010, she was tied for most tries with 7. Played in the played in the 2013 Sevens Rugby World Cup. In 08, she was a Hong Kong Sevens leading scorer with 11 tries in 4 matches. She also won 2 Olympic gold medals at the Winter Olympics in 2010 and 2014 in bobsled. And she also competed in the Pan Am Games in 2013 as a cyclist, inducted into the Rugby World Hall of Fame in 2016. One of Canada's best athletes of all time, author of Redefining Realistic, and motivational speaker. Please welcome Heather Moyse. All right, so welcome back to the Canadian Ruck. We're lucky today we have Heather Moyse on with us. Heather's hails from Prince Edward Island, and she's talking to us today from just inside Toronto there during the COVID crisis. And we're going to talk to Heather a little bit about rugby, maybe get some stories, and maybe she'll talk to us a little bit about her best-selling book, Redefining Realistic, as well. Heather, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Jamie. It's good to be here.
It's great. So let's get right into it. You played in 2 Rugby World Cups in 2006 and 2010, and you also played in the 2013 Sevens Rugby World Cup. What were the atmosphere like in those events from a player's perspective? You got the 15s, 06 and 2010, and you've got the Sevens in 2013. What were the atmospheres? Were they different? How did you guys prepare? How did the girls prepare?
Well, I think they're different in terms of it's different anyway when you're competing in your home country. Obviously, you are a little more familiar with it, with the food, with the temperatures, with the environment and the climate and all that stuff. So, I mean, that's a little bit different. It's also, for us as a country, we were able to train a little bit. It was easier for us to train. I mean, it's quite hard in Canada to train as a national program when we weren't centralized. So we're all just doing our own training wherever we can to be the best that we can be. And then we get together for those 2 weeks leading up to the World Cup. So, I mean, at least being in Canada, it was a little bit easier for travel to get to that location. When it was in England in 2010, there were certain challenges there in terms of, I mean, it's the same as every Olympic Games, right? Every World Cup, you're going to have different hosts and different environments. And so there's always the difference in nutrition and what those kind of cafeteria styles are like and what they're offering and that sort of thing. So I do know that some of our athletes in Canada were struggling with that nutrition side of things when we got to England. And then, I mean, when you go to Russia for sevens, it's the same. With Russia, it was really different because it was just the security there just in Russia anyway, is just different than I think we as Canadians would ever have thought about or considered, even just in the kind of villages where you're staying. And that was just it. That was probably the biggest difference with the Russian ones.
Where in Russia was it? I can't recall.
It was in Moscow.
Moscow.
Yeah, right in Moscow.
And 06 was it was Edmonton, correct?
'06 was in Edmonton for
Yeah.
15s, was in Edmonton. In 2010, it was in England, just outside of London.
Okay.
I don't remember the name of the town. I
It's
can't.
okay.
And for the sevens in 2013, it was in Moscow. Yeah.
3 vastly different locations. That's great experiences.
Yeah, the one in Moscow was crazy because it was a heat wave. They were experiencing a massive heat wave. And so we actually weren't allowed to do some of our training. Like they literally shut things down because it was so hot. We were only allowed to explore the city a little bit. So I think we had an hour where we could actually go down to the square and see some of these historic places. But because it was so hot, we had to go right back again. We literally weren't allowed to be out and explore. We had to stay in air conditioning because it was that hot.
That's
And then I don't know if you remember or not, but the final was played, well, I guess our bronze medal game when we played, it was, no, I guess it was the semifinal to qualify into the final, but we were playing against New Zealand and it was torrential rain, like insanity rain. I've played in pouring rain before, but there was nothing there. This was unlike anything I'd ever played in before.
Wow.
I guess breaking the humidity, breaking the heat wave. I don't know, but it was nuts. Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Thanks for a fun environment.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, which one was your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
I don't know that I have a favorite. I know it's always different and it's always special to be competing on home soil.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because that way you have so many more fans, so many more of your people, your countrymen men and women who can experience that in person, and be there and love that. I don't know. It was pretty special. That was also my first one. So it was, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I would have to lean towards Edmonton. In 2010, things are just, it's different. It's
Yeah.
a little more businesslike and it's a little more. In 2014 in Russia, I was just coming off of hip surgery. So I had hip surgery, I think 6 months before that World Cup or something, maybe 5.5 months. And so for me, it was more of a mental challenge to put myself in a position where I felt like I was okay to be there, considering I was dealing with the physical challenges. It was mostly cardio for me. And when you're talking about sevens, like my hip was solid, it was good, it was ready to go, but just in time for the World Cup. There was no time to develop any kind of endurance or cardio. And so for me, it was like, it was that mind, that thinking of not wanting to let the team down, not wanting to screw something up, not wanting to, not playing quite as assertively as I would normally have, because I wanted to at least know that I had reserve to not let anyone get past me. So it was more playing way more defensively than offensively, and something I'm not used to at all.
Not your game.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So for me, it was like, nobody's scoring on me. That's what I went in there being like, I'm not screwing this up. Nobody's scoring on me. And so it was just it was really different mindset for me.
Big contrast is in the 06 and 2010 World Cups, you had led the tourney with 7 tries in each of them. You were a tourney all-star in 2006. 2008 Hong Kong Sevens, you had 11 tries in 4 matches. And then 2013, you kind of had to completely, like you just said, to make sure that you were a viable member of the team. You looked at it from a different point of view so that you could stay on the pitch, but also make sure that you were helping your teammates in a different way. That's very commendable. That's not a lot of athletes are willing to do that. So good for you for you and your team. That's awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I actually didn't know that about the Hong Kong Sevens.
11 tries in 4 games. That's pretty impressive.
I didn't know that.
you're extremely fast. You're always one of my favorites to watch, like male rugby or female rugby. You were always one of those people that when you had the ball to me, you're like a smaller version of a Jonah Lamu, and how quickly you could move and how deceptive you were. Yeah, so it was always impressive. And then when I was watching your highlights again, I forgot how fast and deceptive you were on the pitch, and it was amazing to kind of see that again. So it was nice. You could probably still play, actually, but it was impressive.
I do miss it. I
Yeah,
do
I
miss
imagine you do.
Yeah, I do miss it. But thank you. That's a huge compliment, actually. Like Jonah's probably one of the few players I actually remember. Like he had such an impact on me when I was at university and they were playing in that World Cup, and I was watching him literally just, I mean, he just ran through people, past people, dragging people, and
Yeah.
so to even be compared to him in the same sentence, it's huge honor,
Well,
huge compliment.
watching those highlights, that's Jonah Lamu and Sonny Bill Williams are the two names that come up with me, because your ability to offload into a tackle, 10 years ago was something that really wasn't being practiced. But for you to have that sense and presence as you're going to deck or as you're on the ground, finding that support, and I don't know how many tries you would have set up that way, but that brought back images of, Sonny Bill Williams over the last 6 or 7 years and how he would offload. So you were kind of a trendsetter and dominant player for many years. So thank you from Canadian fans, absolutely. So and Americans for sure.
I've got to say, like there's one try I remember, and it might be one of the ones you're referring to for I think it was the '06 World Cup. I can't, my job was to score. So I know I didn't really celebrate them. I didn't think anything of them because that was my job. I was finishing what I was meant to be doing on the pitch.
Right.
I just had a really solid team. Like you can't pass the ball to yourself, right? So I had a really great team. And I remember one of the plays where I think I did run from one end of the field to the other but got, like, I don't know, out jigged a few people, but got caught like probably 3 meters from the try line or 2 meters from the try line. And as I went down, the winger from the other side of the pitch, Julie Foster, coming around, and it was almost like as I was going down, just knowing she was going to be there. And I think that's part of what makes a team great. It's not about having individual skills. It's about not only knowing what you need to be successful, but also knowing what your teammates are capable of and what they're willing to do to be successful. So that was pretty good.
I think that might be the one. I think that might be it.
I think it is. I think it is. Yeah.
So when I saw this, I knew you were inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame in 2016, but I didn't realize that you were only the second Canadian and first woman, so just behind Gareth Rees. Talk to us about what that meant to you, what that means to you. That's a pretty prestigious award, an honor.
Yeah. Well, when I got the email, like the letter, it was kind of like one of those letters that you just think are those, I don't know, those letters we just get from the IRB or, just these kind of letters that are just giving you updates for stuff.
Just so you know, I've never got a letter from the IRB, so I'm not referring to. I'm not that. I wasn't a player.
I didn't know if it was a newsletter or what it was, like, having been on the national team. So I just,
right.
I could have very easily have skimmed past this. But I just kind of clicked onto it and it says, Heather, please open this letter from whatever. And I was like, okay. So even then it didn't really say anything. And then I just opened the letter. And as it talks about, saying, we just want to congratulate you. You are being inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame, blah, 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 blah. I was like, my first reaction was, there's a World Rugby Hall of Fame. Like I didn't even know. And that's kind of reflective of me making the national team. When I was longlisted to try out for the women's national rugby team, it was right after nationals when I was playing for PEI one summer. My sister and I were both excited to play in the same team together finally. And we played, and at the end of the tournament, they sat our team down and some woman came up and just announced, we just want to congratulate one of your team members here, Heather Moyse. You've been longlisted. You've been named to Canada's long list. And I said, what do you mean? Well, you've been longlisted to the national women's rugby team. And I'm like, we have a national women's rugby team. Like at that point, I did not know. I didn't know we had a national women's rugby team. At that point, I had just been playing for fun. I played because I loved it. And so to have an honor where you are, inducted into the World Rugby Hall of Fame when you've played because it's your passion and because you love it, instead of just because you're trying to reach a higher level, like it's huge for me. And then once I looked into it more, I mean, Nelson Mandela is in the World Rugby Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of the names, like Wilkinson was like inducted at the same time I was, so we were at the same ceremony. It's just these people where their names that and you respect, and then all of a sudden you're in the same sentence with them, and you're in the same room with some of them, and you're in, it's a huge honor. Huge.
It's going to be very prideful and humbling at the same time. Like Nelson Mandela, Johnny Wilkinson,
I know. It really is extremely humbling. I don't know. There really are. It's really hard to pick any words beyond that, to be honest.
I think that's fair. Yeah. You spoke about this a little bit with my first question, and kind of your thought as to how you had to reinvent yourself. But what are your thoughts on what makes a great team player?
Yeah, I think I did touch on it a little bit earlier. To make a good team player, whether it's smaller teams or bigger teams, I think part of it is really internalizing and knowing exactly what you need to be successful, and kind of honoring that, but also knowing and respecting and honoring what your teammates also need in order to be successful. And some of that, it's can be really difficult for people mentally to accept if their teammates prepare a different way, or they don't, it could be their diet's not quite as strict as you want it to be, or their training regimen is not the same as you think it should be, or maybe their prep time right before a competition is not the same as you want it to be. I mean, this is why, in a way, I have an issue with some of those pep talks right before a game. Some of those like pump up, like right in the locker room before you all run out, that is probably benefiting some of the team, but it's not benefiting. It could actually be detrimental to other people on the team, where they internalize that instead of excitement and like using adrenaline as fuel to focus them and get stuff done. Instead, it acts as pressure, and they internalize it as pressure, and therefore it's that kind of spike of adrenaline. And if it's too high or if it's too far, they're not going to perform as well. That's where they make decisions, fight or flight decisions instead of intelligent decisions. That's where penalties come from, like right off the bat or right at the very end, because they're like, we're talking the dumb penalties, where they know they shouldn't have done that. And they can make or break a game. And so but it's also up to those individual people to know what they need. And maybe it is a matter of them kind of tuning out a pep talk, and then them having their headphones on and listening to whatever music gets them in the right state of mind for them to go out and perform what they need to perform. And it's a lot easier, obviously, with smaller teams or when you're competing as an individual. It's not so easy when you're with big teams. But I think a lot of it is really knowing what you need in order to be successful, and being able to somehow figure out a way to get that amongst the bigger team environment.
Yeah, that's fair. It's interesting too, because you're naturally you're 15s and 7s rugby player. You're also a 2-person bobsled and the individual sport of cycling. So you've kind of seen all ranges of preparation and what it takes to be a great athlete. And you're right, like, as a coach, it can be frustrating when my players are warming up and they have headphones on, because I don't think they're engaged in the game. But when I think back to when I played, whenever those big speeches were happening, as you said, where the guys are getting all rowdy, I would walk away and remove myself, because it was a detriment to my preparation for a match as well. So maybe as a coach, I got to be a little more cognizant of the individual needs and how they're prepping.
Yeah, it's just something to think about, right?
Yeah.
And it's also a way to think about the words we use with people and with our athletes. Like, this is it. Well, no, it's really not it. Do you know what I mean? Like when we
Yeah.
say, this is it, this is the game that counts, this is going to make or break our season. Well, that's just a lot of pressure for some people. For some people, it's exciting and they thrive under pressure. And for
Yeah.
other people, it's going to then
It's crippling.
have them struggle and make poor decisions on the field.
Yeah.
So.
One thing that one of my coaching philosophies for years, and we won't get into much because people want to hear you, not me, but is that winning only matters if you get paid. The outcome doesn't necessarily dictate your preparation, and you need to be responsible for yourself so that you can put your team in a position to win. But half the time you're going to lose, if not more, depending on you thrown in draws. So it is, for me, it's more about the how you get there as opposed to what that final result is. If you get everybody on your team in the eye afterwards and realize you didn't let them down, and I think that's can be just as important as winning. But
yeah, because there's only so much you can control, right?
Yeah.
You can't control what the other teams are doing. You can't control what training they've had, what preparation they've had, what luxury hotel they got to sleep in the night before, the noise that may or may not have been outside their window. Like you can't control what they eat for breakfast in the morning, what their training budget is, what their research budget is, what their technology, but you can't control any of that stuff. So you can only control to put yourself in the best position to compete with that person or that team, and put your best foot forward. And then the rest, like, it will fall where it may. But the whole point is also putting yourself in the mindset to be able to execute what you're actually able to execute. So there's something that I actually wrote about in my book. I referred to it. You hear all the time, it's 90% mental, 10% physical. I don't believe that's true until you're at the elite level. I think that especially going through puberty, like there's 90% difference of people's size, strength, ability, whether they've overcome their awkward stage or not. Like there's 90% difference in people's physical abilities and maybe only 10% difference in how they're mentally able to focus or not focus or handle distractions. But when you get to the elite level of any sport, even in business, when you get to the elite level of anything, when you're kind of at the top of your game, there's still a variance in people's abilities and skills, but probably only 10%, right? We're talking 10% variation in actual skill. And then the other 90% is the mindset piece. It's the mental management piece. It's the ability, that 90% is your ability to execute whatever you have in that 10%. Right. And if you are really terrible in the mental part and the mindset piece, and you're only like a 30 out of 90, even if you're a 10 out of 10 and you're like the best and most skilled person in the world, then you won't be able to execute that 10 out of 10. Whereas you could be a 2 out of 10. So, you're still up in the elite level. You're not quite the best in the world. Like you're kind of just got onto the team. You're just kind of there. But if you are actually mentally solid and able to handle distractions and do all of that stuff, and you're like an 85 out of 90 or an 80 out of 90, then you will come out on top. You'll be the one who doesn't crumble under pressure. And I think that the mindset piece is something that I think we all need to work on.
Oh, 100% guaranteed. I agree with that all the way through for sure. As a multi-sport athlete yourself, what are your thoughts on kids that are being more centralized in a sport? I coach high school rugby. And it seems nowadays that a lot of kids, I don't know if it's parental pressure or what have you, but they're playing like hockey year round and won't try anything else, or basketball year round and they won't try anything else, or football or soccer, what have you. What are your thoughts on that multi-sport ability for high school athletes or beyond? I think
people in general should be playing multiple sports for as long as they can. I know that by playing multiple sports and doing different activities and different things, it prevents overuse injuries. It actually builds a wider base of strength and your ability to take things further in a sport if you choose to specialize later. But the problem is it's not just parents, it's societal momentum. So it's people being told that if they don't also register for the next season, then there might not be a spot for them the following year, or which I think is unfortunate, and it's awful in my opinion. So it's people trying to keep their spots, right? It's trying to hold their spots. So they're they're stuck to being in there. Um, I think I was also fortunate growing up, partly because I didn't, maybe it's because I grew up in PEI, I didn't have the goals of reaching the highest level of sport because I grew up in an academic family. Sport was always considered extracurricular to what I was going to do to earn a living. So it was kind of more of a always on the side for fun kind of thing, um, which meant that for me, it was all about fun and engagement, and not about trying to reach a high level. Whereas now I think the focus is about reaching a high level. And so they're trying so desperately hard to reach a high level in one thing, they're not realizing that they could be putting themselves at risk for more injury.
Yeah.
Um, and also they could be narrowing their focus. Like their skills could be so 100% spot on, great for something totally different, you know? So I think it's also just limiting their experience. I think kids at a young age, if possible, need to be exposed to as many different things as they can,
Yeah.
including climbing trees, racing their bike around the blocks. We did that all the time. We had a timer set up, like it's someone with a timer, and I would see how quickly I could bike around the block, or, racing people to the car in the parking lot. Like it's activity, and younger kids just need all these different types of activity. Climbing trees helps your upper body strength, helps your lower body strength, helps balance, helps all this stuff. I mean, it's just getting used to your body, right? And I don't think anybody's fully used to their body until they're finished puberty anyway. And even then, some people are still struggling.
I'm still
So,
struggling.
yes. So I think we're growing and evolving, and to help get through that, the best thing is to do different activities that get your body using different muscle groups that
Yeah.
you can necessarily be using all in one sport.
No, that's great. That's
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is though, because it is societal momentum,
yeah.
or pressure. Some people it's pressure from parents, for sure. I've seen it a lot. Um, but other times it's just the fear. It's the fear of missing out later. Like, what if I lose my spot? Or what
Yeah.
if and all I have to say to that is, I mean, I didn't start lifting weights till I was 27. I didn't start bobsledding till I was 27.
Yeah.
Didn't go with the national team until I was 26. So, I mean, it's like, if you're good, they're going to take you, depending on whether you've never done it before, depending on whether you've taken a year off to go and travel abroad. If you're serious about it, you'll still do your workouts and do whatever your skill handling, your whatever. You'll do that on your own, so that when you come back, you'll be putting yourself in the best position.
Yeah.
And if you did enough work, if you are the best, they're going to take you.
Yeah.
They're going to take you. So the whole fear thing needs to just kind of be kiboshed. The only thing that they're doing by not taking a break from something is not relying on the fact that they're good, hoping that they'll be chosen because they've been there long enough.
Yeah.
Whereas when you get to the higher levels, it's irrelevant.
No, you make a great point. If you're good enough, you'll be found, right? That makes total sense.
And if you commit to something and you just stick with it because that's what you want, that's what you want, that's what you want, and you pushed other goals or dreams aside because you're like, well, I can't lose this spot. Well, you could very easily break an ankle 2 weeks before this big event you were going for, the World Cup
Yeah.
or the Olympics or whatever. And then is the whole time, are you going to think of it as a waste? Or are you going to say, no, I would have made the same decisions? And if you would have made the same decisions and still not been able to compete in that moment, then fine, then those are the right decisions for you. But if you're going to regret anything that you've done, then you need to rethink what your decisions are going to be along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at Rugby Canada's women's program, currently the 15s and the 7s are both ranked third. Do you have any thoughts on their path moving forward, how they can continue to be and offer such a strong program at both levels?
Well, I think that Canada has, I mean, even back when I played in the World Cup in 2006, we were, what were we, fourth, fifth? It's, the whole landscape has changed a little bit. I mean, there's a lot more pressure now. The funding goes towards sevens. But I mean, we still have solid players. Like the whole sport of rugby has just elevated in this country. And now with sevens having been in the Olympic Games, it's elevating even more. in terms of visibility, in terms of the number of people who are playing, in terms of the type of athletes who are showing up to play. And so, I mean, right now we're in a time where the teams can't train, right? We're dealing with COVID right now, COVID-19, and so teams aren't able to train together. And so it's almost like reverting back to when we were training on our own. It's up to individual team members, it's individual athletes to do the training that they need, the training that they require to be the best and physically fit and most skilled or whatever, and to be prepared for when they're finally able to step on that field again.
Right.
And that is, I think, what all the individual athletes need to do in order to elevate the team and our country in that sport for when they're finally able to play again.
Any sport, I guess, at this point in time, for sure.
Any sport. And I mean, really, it's going to be when they start hitting the fields again, it's going to be which country had the athletes who were able to manage this and mentally manage it, but also physically manage it and continue their training despite everything that's happening. And so that'll kind of come to fruition, or that'll rise to the top. We'll see which individual athletes on those teams were able to kind of maintain that during this whole pandemic.
So the 2020 Olympics being postponed for a few years should be a good thing for everybody then. Give them that extra time.
Well, it's not a good thing because it means we're dealing with a pandemic.
Yeah.
But being extended a year, in my opinion, is better than it just being postponed for a few months.
Yeah.
I mean, part of that is just training cycles and how postponing things for a few months can put people completely off. Whereas if you have a full year, you can kind of revamp and adjust your training cycle so you're still able to be at peak performance next year. It also gives teams and people who need to train in facilities that time to get kind of back into the actual skill development instead of just physical fitness and whatever. But yeah, so I think the year was definitely a good call. Now, that being said, it's going to be really, really great for some athletes. And it's going to be still really, really unfortunate for other athletes. I mean, some athletes who were the fittest they've ever been and so ready to take on the world this summer. Some of those athletes will have an injury between now and next year. And so their dreams will be, squashed. And other people who've been recovering from injury and didn't quite get back in time for this summer now have an extra year to come back and recover and maybe be in the, be able to get that spot back on the team and compete for their country, which, this past year, they probably didn't think they had a shot. So it's going to be a really, really happy, serendipitous story for some people. And for other people, it's unfortunately not going to go very well, but that's the same in anything. So.
That's fair. It could be heartbreak for some and super joyous for others. All right, we're going to take a little change of pace here. I've got 10 thoughts, kind of like a quick fire thing. So I'm just going to say a short phrase and you have to kind of throw your thoughts immediately or as quick as you can. So some have to do with rugby, some don't have to do with rugby.
Okay.
First one, best.
It's like one word answers, like short.
No, not necessarily, but short, yeah. All right. First one, best team you ever faced.
Best team I ever faced. New Zealand.
New Zealand, okay. Best player you ever faced.
I don't remember players' names. I'm awful.
Number 4.
I'm awful. I could kind of explain some people, but I wouldn't be able to. I don't remember people's names. There's a winger from the New Zealand team who was awesome. There was also a fly half from the England team who is deadly in terms of breaking the line and crushing, screwing up things that we had planned and stuff. So they were some that we played against some solid players. I don't know if I could actually specify any.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
And I don't know their names anyway, so that's an awful answer.
You're probably going to answer the next question the same, but like the hardest person you ever, the toughest person you ever played against or with. Maybe it's somebody that you played with.
Well, why don't we take ourselves off the international level and talk about when I played like within Canada?
Sure.
I would have to say one of the toughest players we played against in Canada, who was also then became my teammate on the national team. I would have to say Maria Gallo was
Nice.
one of the toughest players. Oh gosh, I can't just say one. Gillian Florence, another one. Um, I mean, Julie Foster she was just speed on the outside. She was just, I don't know. I can't.
A
I am not good at this game.
little easier. Chips or cookies?
Depends on the day and depends on the kind. If they're cookies, they have to be soft.
Okay.
Like the chewy Chips Ahoy cookies ones, like soft cookies.
Straight out of the oven.
Chips, it's not just flat out chips. It's like salt and vinegar, maybe all dressed depending on the,
All right. Favorite beer?
Ryan 7 in a tall glass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guilty pleasure?
Guilty pleasure, probably Ryan 7 in a tall glass. Along with my chips and cookies.
There you go.
I am a sugar fiend. Like I eat a lot of sugar, so but I don't feel guilty about it. So I don't really know if you can call it a guilty pleasure because I think guilt is a waste of emotions. So
Okay.
You're
not Catholic.
All
right. Best place for a post-match Ryan Ginger?
The closest pub.
Just the closest one. Not the old triangle in Charlottetown, or?
Well, I didn't play a ton of rugby. Like we weren't in high school.
Oh,
we weren't going to pubs. We weren't going to pubs in high school. But if we were, well, no. In Summerside, come on. I would say now probably one of the best places I enjoy going is the Gahan, and when I'm in Charlottetown. Yeah, like right now in Liberty Village in Toronto, it's maybe like Williams Landing or local. Like there are a couple of little kind of restaurants and pubs around here, but nothing fancy. For me, it doesn't, as long as you're with friends, it doesn't matter.
Sounds good.
Be the closest hole in the wall, it doesn't really matter to me.
Best match you were ever a part of?
Oh. I don't know. It might be the one we referred to before, that game against, I think it was the game against England in 2006 Rugby World Cup. I think it was because it was just, we fought till the bitter end and I think, surprised people. Like we came back, we were at a deficit and then came back. That might have been it. That might have been one, yeah. I think we really rallied as a team there and it was fun. Like that was fun playing. Yeah.
Best captain you ever played with?
Captain Morgan? Are we are we on a theme here? Okay, taking it back, reeling it back. Best captain I ever played for. I don't know. We had some great captains in the national team. Probably. I mean, maybe Maureen McMahon, maybe. She was one of the captains. I think Gillian Florence was one of our captains at one point. I think it's just those, yeah, I think I think I've always had pretty good captains who can lead the team. Oh, there are a couple who didn't, let's say.
Who was that?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Yeah. All right, last one. Who had the biggest impact on you as a player?
Who had the biggest impact on me as a player? I would probably have to say, my sister, who got me started in it. But then my high school coach in grade 12, he was the high school rugby coach. He was also the athletic director. He basically told me that I had so much potential. But then he followed up with saying, yes, but you need to know that potential is just talent you don't have yet. And that meant nothing to me at the time, but it really flooded back to me later when I started playing for the national team, for a bunch of national teams. And all of a sudden it was this phrase that like stuck in my brain about potential is just talent that you don't have yet, meaning you could be really good. Like you're good now, but you could be really good. There's the potential to be really, really good, but that is all talent that you don't have yet unless you work for it. And so I think that just that like sentence in the back of my mind when I was, even though he wasn't physically there coaching me for the rest of it, I think that's kind of started helping to develop my mindset of not selling myself short. And that's what my whole business is about now, is about helping other people not sell themselves short, because we just underestimate what we're capable of. And I think that sentence had a huge impact on me, for sure. Yeah.
That's good. Only got a few questions left, and it's kind of, and then we'll wrap up. But talk to us a little bit about redefining realistic, and how you use your story as like a motivational speaker in your line of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Redefining Realistic, it's not an autobiography. I do share anecdotes and stories and things from my life and from my experiences, but I use those as backdrops to help explain certain points in messaging. And the whole book is really about human potential. So it is about not selling yourself short. It's about how you shift your mindset in times of transition or times of difficulty or in the face of challenges, and how basically as a speaker, I've spoken to and worked with individuals and companies all across the country and even outside of Canada now. And what I've come to realize over the years is that the qualities it takes to be successful as an athlete are the same qualities it takes to be successful in any occupation or industry. And so those are the qualities. I'm not talking about specific skills to execute the job, but like the qualities it takes to successfully manage change, face challenges, and overcome obstacles that will inevitably pop up along the way to achieving anything we want. And so that is a lot about what I speak about, is that mindset in terms of overcoming challenges. And then I use examples of how I overcame some of the challenges I faced in order to reach the top of the Olympic podium, in order to, reach the highest level in rugby, in order to, do those things. And it's fun to be able to put sports anecdotes in there because people can relate to that, whether they watch it on TV, whether they've played it. But it does come down to being applicable in anything. So whether it is in sports, in business, or overcoming something that people are dealing with just in life. And so it's been really, really great. The book's been doing really well. The audiobook has just come out, so I'm really excited about that. People can get it for free, actually, especially now when people are cooped up in their homes. Like just listening to an audiobook while they're doing housework, while they're, relaxing in a bath, while they're washing the dishes, while they're doing whatever. Like a lot of people are now liking that multitasking and feeling like they're doing multiple things while you're exercising, in your house. And so I'm really happy that it's finally out. It came out just last week, I guess, on audiobook, and
Awesome.
you can get it, and you can get it for free if you're not an audiobook person yet. Hopefully become addicted to audiobooks, because I started liking them when I started commuting. So I know a lot of people aren't commuting right now, but it's, if you just go to books.heathermoyse.com/audiobook, and then that takes people to free. You can get it free on Audible. I think you sign up for a subscription, but the subscription is less than what one book would cost anyway. So anyway, it's really great. It's a really great deal, and hopefully it can reach and help a lot of people. I actually just got a message on Instagram this morning from a teacher who said that she's reading my book and she's actually sharing quotes and like pull quotes and sections of my book with her students virtually during this whole thing. And I was like, oh, I thought it was awesome. I was blown away, and I was really excited to hear that. So it's been really, really great. Yeah, I've been really enjoying it.
I'm glad to hear about the audiobook, because I wanted to go out and buy it a couple of weeks ago, but all our bookstores are closed where
I know. Everything closed. You can still order my book through my website.
Okay.
And when I tell people to go to my website, I like that because then I get to personalize the books before they get sent out.
Nice.
So it usually goes, and I have someone who helps me, and she'll write and ask who you want it addressed to. So if you want it addressed to someone else as a gift or to yourself, or if
Yeah.
you're ordering multiple, then you can give me a list of names who you're buying them for. And they're actually pretty ideal in a time like this, where people are kind of needing a bit of inspiration and motivation in a time when everything is uncertain, everybody's in transition. So it's really great. So that's just at heathermoyse.com, and you can just find the book there. But the audiobook is, I'm super excited about the audiobook. Yeah.
Do you want to grab the book from behind you there and kind of show everybody what it looks like?
Oh, yeah. Well, there are two of them up here, I think. Yeah. So this is the hardcover.
Yeah.
So with the hardcover, it's kind of more giftable, or I actually had someone who told me that they got the audiobook and the hardcover because they love following while I'm reading to them. They'd be following along in the book. And I'm a highlighter. Like for books like this, I like actually highlighting and writing and stuff in the corner. So it's pretty good. There's like pull quotes and all that stuff in the back for this one. It's actually got like a photo album.
Nice.
Color photos all in the back. There's a little bit of a Q&A, but all these photos back there to make it a little more personal so people can kind of see the inside scoop. But
That's awesome.
yeah, this is a little bit more of a giftable book, but the audio's, the practical one when you're multitasking and doing 100 things at a time.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. I was going to get you to talk to us about road you traveled to make it the highest level of bobsled and cycling, but you've kind of done that. You talked about overcoming a hip injury, and I think you had a broken ankle in there at one point as well. Probably more other nicks and bangs and stuff as well.
Yeah, I've broken my shoulder. I destroyed my ankle a couple of times. Hip surgery on both hips. Actually, I've had hip surgery on both. Those are the major ones. The other one, the minor ones are nothing that we need to talk about. The black eyes, the contusions, the Charlie horses, the little mild sprains, the thumb, no longer, all that stuff.
All right. So I heard a rumor that you have a great story from playing at my school, Rossley Netherwood, back in the mid to late 90s about a try you almost scored. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so Rossley, yes. Big rugby tournament there when I was in high school. I learned a big lesson at that tournament from that school. That is where I learned to go and actually look at the end zone before every game. So even before a national, like whatever, you go and check, regardless of if you're warming up on the field with the team, go check out the end zone, because at this particular school, I did not score. One of the tries I did not score was because I ran out the end. Like, it was the shortest end zone I've ever experienced in my life. No more than 2 meters. Like, no, and it can't even, maybe even 1.5 meters. I don't even know.
Yeah,
but the end zone is literally non-existent. So yeah, so I tipped, all of a sudden I saw the end of the line, and I'm like tiptoeing, whatever, trying to stay, like trying not to fall over in it. And my toe just went over the line and it didn't count. So I was, I'm sure I was super annoyed. The lessons learned, and I've never done that again. I've never ran out the end zone in any game I've ever played since then. See, so lessons learned. You take that,
perfect.
You internalize it.
And just so you don't feel too bad, it happens pretty much once a year where somebody runs through the end zone. We have 5 fields at our
school. Makes me feel so much better.
I imagine. We have 5 fields at our school, and that one is definitely the only one with restricted end zones, I guess you would say.
I feel like, was that kind of up on a hill?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have 2 more above that now. They probably weren't there when you played. But yeah, it's interesting.
I'm glad to know I'm not alone.
No, you're not.
All of the people who ran out the end of that end zone, we should start a club.
Yes, you could. Yeah, nice little Facebook group.
Yeah.
So it is disappointing. So that because of the COVID-19, I've been at the school. This is my 14th year. I've coached rugby there every year. I played in Rugby Fest 2, 3, 4, and 5, and this is supposed to be our 30th year, but it was canceled. And it's a pretty big heartbreaker for the school, but like other schools, we're not even operating right now. There's, 45 to 48 teams, both men and women, 15s and sevens, making use of all 5 of our fields for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it's it's really, it really sucks that it's not happening, but it makes sense because everybody needs to stay safe. Stay safe.
Yes.
Lastly, any last thoughts? I guess maybe people to thank. You talked about your coach in high school. I recently went to a conference at Waterloo, I think in 2013, um, and I really enjoyed. You spoke about grit, um, doing the easy things when one really shouldn't during critical moments, following your dreams and making sure that you empty the tank to get there and not having any regrets. Um, I really enjoyed listening to it for sure. And it's something I think that when school starts back up, it'll be something that I probably play to my classes to help them understand that you have to, you're not going to get anything out of life if you don't put anything into it. And I think that's a pretty good underlying message. Is there anything that you want to talk about, address with that, or it's entirely up to you?
Yeah, no, I'm glad. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. And I'm glad that you think that there will be value in sharing that with your students, because I'm there. I mean, I obviously created that so that people could take something away and internalize it and apply it to their lives. The whole crux of the messaging was, no, no guts, no glory. But when you talked about the guts, it wasn't just ramming things like pursuing. The guts had to do with like following your gut instinct sometimes and actually making choices that are right for you, the ones that aren't going to feel bad later, the ones that are the ones that you're not going to regret. So it's, and whether that's like no excuses, like to have no regrets means having no excuses sometimes. And sometimes that's just ownership. It's accountability and it's ownership, and making choices knowing that there are consequences with every choice we make. And that basically with those consequences, you have to, in a way, looking at those consequences or the possibility of consequences with your choices is in a way a strategy on helping you make decisions in the first place, and making those right choices that are right for you. So yeah, I love that you'd be sharing that with your students. Yeah.
I really enjoyed the one with you showed the picture of the kid about to have a breakdown in the grocery store. And
Yes.
I don't know how many times you see that as a parent, that parents give in, and then the kid, as they grow up, they know how to get their way, and
Yeah.
good
I know.
goes
It's
out the
like
window.
the short term versus the long term,
Yeah, yeah,
right? It's like that short term reward versus long term reward. And as soon as you have, when you give in, that you're setting the trend, you're setting the
yeah.
pattern, you're setting expectations, and right then and there, it's those are that's the fork in the road.
Yeah.
Didn't say they're easy. Didn't say
Nope.
those choices are easy. But
Easy
yeah,
doesn't always mean best.
well, easy does not always mean best.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Heather. It's been an absolute pleasure and thrill to chat with you.
Oh, thank you.
And you're welcome. And enjoy staying safe and healthy in Toronto. And hopefully, this doesn't last too much longer, and that you get out and get back to your active self.
Hopefully we all get out and get more active outside. But yes, Jamie, thanks so much for having me on. It was awesome.
All right. Cheers. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you.
And that was awesome. Great chatting with Heather Moyse. Um, Big thanks to Heather for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking out of the time of your schedule. And as I love chatting rugby, and I love chatting about life with passionate people. And Heather is truly one of those individuals who's really passionate about life, about athletics, rugby, bobsled, you name it. She's very inspiring to listen to her stories and have a great conversation. Good PEI, maritime girl, doing really well for herself. Hopefully you get a chance to check out Heather's website, heathermoyse.com. And if you have a chance, pick up her book. Either order it from her website, or when the stores open up eventually, try and buy it. But Redefining Realistic is a great read. Everybody should get lots of little great advice about life in general, and it's a really good story to read. I'd like to say thanks to Bensound Music for supplying with their tunes. And as always, feel free to drop me a line various ways and ask for future topics on podcasts. Coming up shortly, we'll have DTH Van der Merwe, we have Tyler Ardron, we have Gareth Reese, we have Magali Harvey, and Brad May of the Buffalo Sabres, who played high school rugby, has just agreed to be on the podcast as well. So we've got some nice names coming up. And as always, this is Jamie signing off. And until next time, keep on rocking.